being organized by ASSOCHAM. Today we have a very eminent galaxy of experts with us. I would like to introduce all the eminent experts, including our session moderator, Mr. Prashant Agrawal, who is a partner tax and regulatory services PwC India. We are also having many eminent galaxy of experts in the panelist, including Mr. Siddharth Mehta, who is a tax technology leader PwC India, Mr. Neeraj Hathi Singh, founder and managing director, Signet Infotech Private Limited, Mr. Anup Kumar Nanglia, India Tax Head ZAP, Mr. Parna Ghosh, CIO Minda Industries, who will be joining us shortly, and Mr. Shrey Gupta, Head of Tax Schlumberger India, Sri Lanka and Bangladesh. So I would like to request Shri Prashant Agrawal to kindly take the things forward in this session. Over to you, Prashant sir.
Thanks, Avinash. Thanks for introduction as well as to ASSOCHAM for organizing this session. It's a pretty interesting one with the changing face of how taxes are being dealt with on ground and the use of technology around it. This session does make a lot of sense at this stage. What we'll have as a whole session would be we'll first request Siddharth to start with or have a short presentation just to give a context to the whole session through how the tax technology has evolved over the last few years, especially after the introduction of GST. And subsequently, we'll have our eminent panelists take up some questions and provide their thoughts and inputs on various facets around this subject. So to start with, I'll request Mr. Siddharth Mehta to start off with the session with his presentation. Thanks. Over to you, Siddharth.
Thanks, Prashant. Let me just share my screen. Is my screen visible?
Yes, Siddharth, it's visible.
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone, and many thanks for making time for this session. Well, as we all know, the taxation system in India has been witnessing a massive technology-led disruption over the last few years, right? Well, the trigger for this disruption was primarily GST, but the impact has clearly gone beyond GST now and is quite visible on other taxes as well. So in my presentation today, I would like to share with you our experience and observations around how the tax function has been evolving in different companies from a technology standpoint. And more importantly, I would like to share with you with certain use cases or scenarios for deploying technology to make the tax function more effective and fit for future. So just to set the context, till about 5 years back, before GST was introduced, most of the tax compliances used to be offline. While income tax returns have been online for a while now, but there is no seamless integration between the taxpayer's ERP and the government portal. Most of the filings used to be at aggregate or summary level with rather straightforward calculations. And as a result, bulk of the tax litigation used to revolve around interpretation of law, which was often subjective and hence people-driven. And then came GST, and the whole world for tax professionals turned upside down. So the government developed a strong fancy for technology, and all compliances under GST got automated. Now, with transaction level reporting and multiple complex reconciliations, the industry had no choice but to play catch up with the government on tax technology. And this disruption hasn't stopped yet. In fact, now we are witnessing the next major wave of transformation where the compliances are becoming more granular, more real time. All of us are aware of e-invoicing, right? So the government is also integrating various tax and non-tax portals to do a 360-degree profiling of all the taxpayers. So they have clearly realized the power of data and technology to draw useful insights, which can even go beyond tax. And then there's a lot of focus on digital tax administration, which includes things like electronic or faceless assessments. So what did the disruption mean to the industry? Well, it has completely transformed the way the tax function used to operate earlier. So tax is now more compliance and less of interpretation. Now, given the wide ambit of taxation and a liberal credit regime, there's only as much one can do in terms of tax planning, right? On the other hand, because of all these transaction level compliances and multiple reconciliations, bulk of the time of the tax team is now spent on undertaking compliances. Even the audits, assessments, litigation that is happening is largely focused on numbers and data. And we're witnessing similar trend under direct tax as well, especially after the increase in ambit of TDS and TCS compliances. Also, tax earlier used to operate on a rather standalone basis, and the interactions of the tax team were largely confined to the finance and the legal teams. But now tax is at the core of most organizations, and it's got multiple touch points with different business functions, be it IT, supply chain, sourcing, and so on. And because of the standardization of laws and the increase in ambit of taxation, the stakes attached to every tax decision that you take have increased substantially. So for instance, earlier under the excise or the VAT regime, most of the issues were confined to a specific location or a specific state. But now, even if an issue originates at a state level, there is always a risk that at some point in time, it could become a pan-India issue. And therefore, the onus on the tax team to take correct tax positions, and more importantly, to ensure timely and accurate compliances has increased manifold. So because of all these aspects, the management in most companies is now expecting the tax team to play a bigger role and to deliver more. At the same time, there is this general perception that because of automation, the tax team should be able to turn around things faster with a smaller team size. So to deal with all these changing requirements and expectations, most of the companies have been actively working towards automating their tax compliances and streamlining and standardizing the underlying processes. It's not a matter of choice anymore. It's become more of a survival issue. At the same time, there is a growing realization that if equipped with the right set of tools and technology, the tax function can add a lot more value to the business rather than being confined to core compliances. So where does one start their automation journey in the tax function? Well, the starting point is generally the statutory compliances that need to be undertaken either periodically or on a real-time basis. So this would typically include most of the GST compliances like GSTR1, GSTR3B, various other GST returns, as well as transaction level compliances like e-invoicing and e-payment. These are the areas where we have seen maximum automation happening over the last few years. When it comes to vendor reconciliation, which is a prerequisite for claiming GST credits, while a lot of companies have gone for technology solutions, but many of them still struggle, in terms of the manual effort involved. And this is one area where a lot of companies have gone back to the drawing board and they're revisiting the entire vendor invoice reconciliation workflow to see how they can automate it better. Likewise, there's growing interest in automating other compliances like GSTR9 or GSTR9C, which is basically the annual return and the audit report under GST, as well as various direct tax compliances like TDS and TCS. Over the last 1.5 years, we have also seen the user requirements evolve a lot. So companies are no more interested in standalone compliance applications. They're rather looking at tax technology as an enabler to solve specific business problems. So for example, now there's a lot of interest in building additional tax related controls within the ERP itself to make the ERP system more conducive to the tax function. Now, this is one area where we're working with a lot of companies. And the idea is to build all these controls, checks, and validations within the ERP so that any issues or gaps, if any, can be identified right at the time of transaction booking rather than waiting for the month-end compliances to happen. So for instance, while onboarding a new vendor or even before issuing a PO to a vendor, one may want to look up the compliance and the registration status of that vendor. Similarly, while booking a special transaction like, let's say, a reverse charge invoice or a three-party invoice transaction, one would expect the ERP system to automatically determine the correct tax code and the tax treatment rather than leaving it to the user's discretion. In fact, till date, there are a lot of companies which are still struggling with the basic reports and registers, be it the sales register or the purchase register or a TDS report or a 180-day payment reports, which are all required for undertaking different tax compliances. So clearly, there's a lot of room for automation within the ERP itself, or to deploy various ERP bolt-on solutions to make the overall system more robust from a tax standpoint. Now under GST, since the credits available to the company are predicated on the vendor's compliances, there's now a lot of thrust on vendor management from a tax standpoint. Now here again, technology comes in handy. So like I mentioned earlier, using technology solutions, one can look up the compliance status of the vendors on either periodically or on need basis. You can implement some sort of payment retention program for non-compliant vendors or habitual defaulters and so on. In fact, once you identify any discrepancies in any of the vendor invoices or transactions, one can again use technology solutions to communicate those details to the vendors and seek their inputs or feedback in a very seamless and a fully automated manner. In fact, some companies have gone to the extent of automating the underlying accounting entries also. So for example, the GST credit would automatically move from an interim or a control account to a final account once the invoice recorded in the ERP is automatically reconciled with GSTR 2A. Automating repetitive tasks in the tax function is another low-hanging fruit, but an often overlooked space in the area of tax technology. So if you assess the time spent by the tax team on undertaking compliances, bulk of the time in most cases is spent on extracting data from the ERP or cleansing the data or converting it into a format which is accepted by third-party tools being used for undertaking compliances. Now, ideally, one would expect these third-party solutions to be flexible enough to accommodate different formats. But if that is not the case for any reason, then again, one can use technology solutions like RPA or macros or other ETL applications like Alteryx to reduce human effort and improve accuracy. Likewise, one can use technology to read standard tax documents like a bill of entry or a shipping bill or a 26A statement or an income tax return, and so on and so forth. So these focused solutions can go a long way in reducing the time spent by the tax team on such cumbersome and rather non-value-adding activities. Another upcoming area for automation is tax-enabled information management across the organization. So the idea is to create a robust knowledge sharing platform across the organization, which would comprise of different applications or modules catering to different requirements of the users. So for example, you could have a knowledge management portal, which becomes a central digital repository for all the relevant acts, rules, tax SOPs that you have, any council opinions that you may have obtained, and so on. Then you could deploy a dispute tracker to keep track of all the ongoing litigation, audits, assessments, investigations, refund claims, and so on. Depending upon the number of users you have in your company, one could also have a tax app to provide anytime, anywhere access to all this information to the users. And likewise, you could have tax e-learns or training courses hosted on a training portal, both for new joiners as well as periodic refresher courses for the existing team. So depending upon the size, scale, and complexity of the organization, one or more of these applications or modules could be relevant. Now, once the core compliance automation has stabilized, the focus will automatically and naturally shift towards analytics and dashboarding to draw useful insights, not only for the tax function, but also for other areas of business like finance, supply chain, sourcing, and so on. Now, clearly, this is one area where the government is far ahead of the industry as of now. They've done a commendable job in terms of analyzing all the tax return data to draw useful insights and to identify potential tax evaders. So these were some of the use cases for deploying technology to make the tax function more effective. Needless to say, these are only illustrative and by no means exhaustive. Now, this is more of an ideal or a to-be state that one would want to achieve, where you have the tax function working more like a center of excellence, and you would deploy all the relevant tools and technologies. And all interactions of the tax function with different stakeholders, both internal and external, would be powered by technology. Now, as we all know, automation is a journey and it's okay to pace it according to your organization's dynamics. But what is important is that one should be aware of all these use cases, the various options available in the market, and the best practices in this space. Well, that's all I had in terms of the presentation. Thank you. Over to you, Prashant.
Thanks, Siddharth, and very well put in terms of the whole context on tax tech, especially how it has evolved over the last 4 years, the whole journey. I mean, being an indirect tax person all my life, moving from VAT to GST was easier, but then moving to cloud, to on-prem, to integrate your ERP, knowing more about SAP or Oracle vis-a-vis what you do in GST has in itself been quite an adventurous journey, which together we have undertaken in the firm and for our companies. And that's the true evolution for now as an indirect tax. But as you rightly said, Siddharth, even for direct tax, it's almost coming. And people will have to realize fast how technology can change things seriously for any business function for that matter. So with that, I think, having Siddharth putting together all the context to the current subject, I'll have my panelists here. So we have Anup tax head for SAP India. We have Neeraj as a Signet founder, Parna Ghosh, CIO, Uno Minda Group, and Shwe, tax head for Schlumberger here. And I'll start with you, Anup, and to all panelists for that matter, in terms of the initial comments, how you have seen in your own way experience this change in the journey from how we used to take care of the tax function to where we are in terms of using technology enabled and undertaking the tax function accordingly. So Anup, I'll start with you in terms of how has been the journey at SAP India at your end, please.
Yep. So I can say a tax technology perspective, we are very happy. We have a lot of positive points to talk about, but definitely there are always improvement points which we can discuss about it. But yes, I can say we have a lot of positive views about technology, how we are using it and how government is also looking forward. So the basic point which I will talk about 2 years back, who thought that Corona will come and then we all will be working from home suddenly the next day? And it's almost 2 years we are not talking about like to go to office, back to office. And would have thought the same thing if we would have had the similar situation 5 years back. Like could we would have worked from home at that time? Now we can do everything from home. We don't need to go to office. We can manage everything end to end from home. So that is a big change, I can say. Even the mindset, we are not even realizing such a big change that the tax team can work from home. So that we would not have thought a few years back. So that is a big change I can see from basic mindset perspective. And definitely a lot of changes has been discussed by Siddharth, like the returns which we with a GST perspective, if I say what we had pre-GST and post-GST, earlier we used to file a lot of tax returns in each state. Now we have a common return, pan-India return we can file. Definitely the compliances have increased, but definitely from pan-India perspective, we can have a common GST return and we can file in automized way. And then we have a one source of data, like uniform data from one source, which we can submit to a government. So in a short, I can say we have positive changes. We are positive about this tax technology change, but definitely we'll talk more about the challenges which we are facing and what are the improvement points in going forward. So yeah, we'll come back on that.
Sure. Thanks, Anup. Thanks so much for your insights on that. I'll move to Neeraj. I mean, Neeraj, this is, 5 years back, this kind of a session would have been music to your ears. You wouldn't have heard of it. Or, speaking of tax people, in terms of a product company founder from an IT side, was not something that we had heard of or seen before. So, how does it feel 4 years down the line via JC and all the efforts that you've made at Signet? What's been your experience?
I think, Prashant, thanks for the introduction and really the transformation or the journey into the tax technology has been very unique. And I still remember that GST, and when they selected us as one of the GSP, had put our mobile numbers onto the website. And we had literally become telecallers. So kind of talking to 25, 30 people in a day and explaining them that how the journey is going to be. And the first problem in July 2017 was being able to upload the invoices. So that was the first area that we were talking. Today, we don't even kind of talk about whether the invoices are going to be uploaded or not uploaded. And what kind of Siddharth talked about was very different than what we were talking about in 2017. So that's a kind of a transformational journey that all of us have traveled together. I really joke around quite a bit that per se, basically, I'm not even a technology person. I'm not even a tax person. But daily, I'm talking about tax technology and interacting with the technology people as well as tax professionals. And so many times, being a consultant to so many tax professionals as well as technology people really is very different into that. So it has been the biggest transformational journey. Post to before 2017, Signet did not have a single client in India. That was a reality. And today, highest amount of Signet clients are in India. That's a kind of a transformation we had. And we thought that it will be a GST portal for filing returns would be a kind of basic thing. from the transformation has happened for that being the single source of truth, it being the kind of a repository for all the kind of data that it is holding into the system, moving from the data to kind of helping the compliance part, helping the litigation part, helping the notifications for the vendor interactions. It has been a kind of a transformation that has happened. And I think we have come out with so many different versions in last 5 years that no product will see so much amount of transformation in such a short period of time. Then now going global with it. So that has been a great journey. I will say GST has changed our lives at Signet, and I think that's highly beneficial to all of us into the long run.
Surely, Neeraj, I mean, can relate to you completely. I mean, at PwC, we started off our tax technology only once the GST came in, and similar to what you said, the difficulties were there initially, but nobody today talks about those difficulties. But new challenges definitely have come up, and we'll definitely talk about them as well. So, Shrey, over to you. What's been your say on this? You know, how you as business stakeholder on tax function seen the transformation from how we used to work pre-GST era to now. What's been your sense on that?
Yeah, so thank you, Prashant. So first of all, good afternoon, everyone. So I think from our standpoint, Prashant, I see the impact on a twofold basis. One on an external and the other on the internal. First touching on the internal, as Siddharth was also mentioning, earlier most of the tax teams or the organizations were very used to a software called Excel. I'll put it as a software for now, but they were very used to working on Excel. And when GST came in, or when the changes in the direct tax, and with this government focusing a lot on digitization, the entire mindset has to be changed. And the management was obviously not too keen to invest in ERPs, etc. So therefore, it was more, instead of instead of running, you need to walk first. So we were focusing more on what needs to be done first, rather than investing too heavily into the software infrastructure. Secondly, I think the amount of time that the teams were spending in terms of compliance, etc. And with the technology coming in, how can you sort of merge the two or integrate the two in terms of reducing your overall time the team spends in the compliance is a major game changer. I think with PwC and the other players in the market, I think the technology that has been brought about really has helped the teams all around in terms of reducing, the time spent, and I would say a non-value addition work, and more in terms of the value addition work. So it has been a mixed bag, but I think we are going in the right direction, I would say.
Great, Shrey, great. And that's been a difference, how the tax functioned by itself and the team on ground had to change their way of working and both adopt technology and probably upskill themselves to use the technology. Initially, obviously, it was a barrier, looked like a barrier or hurdle to everyone.
Correct.
We need to get onto this, having done VAT all our lives using Excel itself or service tax for that matter.
Correct.
But I think it's been a good change, and now we see a lot of innovative ideas coming from people on ground, where they want more use of technology. There is exceptional. And move on to Pernada. Pernada, CIO of Uno Minda Group, the big auto ancillary group here. Again, just like Neeraj, I don't see you on these kind of panels 5 years back, Pernada. Now you're part of discussions with tax people to understand what is their requirement, and you are helping them select the solutions on GST advice. So how has been the journey for you in the last 4 years? You get phone calls that returns are not getting filed, about which you know nothing. So how has been the journey for you at Minda Group?
Yeah, very nice question. Before I start, first of all, thanks to Prashant and Ankit for inviting me in this panel. And nice to see second virtual summit on TechnoTax as flying off fine. And also thanks to all the sponsors and event partners for organizing this. So I think it's very interesting when we are going for the 75th year of our independence, Azadi Ki Amrit Mahotsav, and we are celebrating across all industries, functions, and geographies across India. I look at 30, 40 years back, 30 years back I have started my career, but before that also we had the regime of state sales tax and central sales tax. Then we moved to VAT and CST. Then we moved to this current one, the GST. And then going forward, I believe there will be a lot of many modernization or transformation happening when by this time maybe we'll retire, but then still things will continue to evolve. The changes what I see in the mindset of people is like earlier we used to see the ledgers used to be printed, and people used to do reconciliation, and then auditors used to come, and they used to verify the tax auditors, and everything used to be manual. Then it went to the ERP systems of SAP. But now the biggest advantage is connecting the supply chain. That is what is the transformation happening today. And why government is doing that? I think three major pillars or drivers in the whole discussion. One is transparency, second is speed, and third is accuracy. I think these three things, if you look at the way government is transforming the complete platform, and as you know, like we are experienced to Amazon kind of experience or Flipkart kind of experience or many other food aggregators nowadays, where the supplier and the buyer and the aggregator all talking the same platform, and as well as the delivery partner. So here also same thing is happening. The suppliers are talking with us, we are talking with the suppliers, we are talking with our OEMs are talking to us in the same platform. I think this the biggest advantage happened is improvement of productivity and unnecessary time killing. And if Prashant, if you remember our journey also, we started in 2017, along with PwC, and we had a big disruption. We had just, the HANA implementation going on 25th of June. We went live on the database, and 1st July we went ahead with GST. So two disruptions happened back to back, and it was a huge change for the whole organization. In fact, for GST also, we had to reconcile 50 plus locations in one single, I will say, platform, and bring in all the data points. And I think it was really crazy in the beginning. But looking at today, the way things are changing and the way the government is planning for all the scaling up of applications and infrastructure and other investments, I think things will be very different in future. Last but not the least, I will just focus on the technology part. See, currently, I believe we have our ERP system connecting with the e-way bill platform, the IRN platform, and also the GSTN platform through the PwC platform. So PwC becoming our integrator, and all the other platforms are getting connected seamlessly. And tomorrow, I believe government will also make sure that all the automatic reconciliations are happening in, with the help of artificial intelligence and blockchain and many other technologies they will be bringing up, if I understand very well. And indirect tax, looking at the way it was handled 20-30 years back, and today the way it is getting handled, and the way also the direct tax is also getting, the regime is getting changed. I think it will be a huge leap in the digital transformation as far as government of India is concerned. And Digital India is actually talking about these services which government is providing to citizens or businesses or industries or individuals, and the way the things reconcile to bring in more transparency and accuracy. I think this is the way things are going forward, and I think big change is going to happen in the future through all the new technologies which are coming up. Over to you, Prashant.
Thanks, Pranada. I mean, that's quite insightful. And what you said was very right that you expect a huge leap that the government may take from a digital standpoint and how technology is used. And actually, they took a big leap of faith when they went live with GST and the way the technology was brought in. We are all aware of the challenges we faced initially, not only us as companies and taxpayers, but also government at its end through GSTN, where the return filing was becoming a challenge they had to look at. But the great part was the nimbleness on the government part to make those changes to ensure that the taxpayers are taken care of over a period of time. And as we discussed, those things now are usual in terms of filing those returns, which was a challenge in July at that point of time when we all were struggling and burning the midnight oil. So Neeraj, I like to ask you, how do you see the market now? You are very near to the companies, the taxpayers. You're also having ears to GSTN. So what sort of things you see that the companies are asking now? Because more or less return filing or undertaking then going to 2020 when e-invoice came in and there were a lot of challenges at that point of time. We have crossed those barriers now. I mean, more or less, both of these compliances are pretty much automated or streamlined, touch wood, and they should be. But what is it on ground you're seeing, like Siddharth, that identified areas which companies are asking for or demanding? What's your say on that? What do you think you are hearing on ground? and seeing the demand for now?
The biggest demand today is, I would say, on one side is the ITC credit, because that is the biggest problem. And as you are aware, the biggest, again, a major change is coming into that, moving away from 2A based reconciliation to 2B based reconciliation is going to be a major pain point for the customer. So this is the kind of a immediate problem that all our clients or whoever we are talking into the industry are facing today. So reconciliation is a major challenge that I would put it across. Second major challenge is everybody is asking for more intelligence out of the data that we have. Because today, if you take, we have a SKU level information, we have a HSN level information, we have the kind of information in terms of what is going through their logistics, how they can kind of improve upon how many trucks should be available on a daily basis to load all the vehicles that they need to do. What is the kind of seasonal difference that is happening on a kind of a pharma side? What is the type of doctors available into a particular area, and whether their supply into that particular area has anything to do with the kind of marketing initiatives that they may be taking. So all this type of high level of intelligence is something that the clients are expecting about it. Digitization beyond a point in terms of integrating all the systems, so everything becomes single seamless, and there is a kind of a single point which is there from which they can extract the data or inform to that. The kind of initially I was seeing that there was a kind of a resistance of usage of technology, so that there was a kind of understanding that we do not want to automate everything. There was a kind of a fear that our importance will get lost if everything gets automated. But today, the sheer volume of the work and the notices that are coming in is so high that everybody has no option but to automate. And Prashant, if in one of the GSTN meetings, like informally I had joked many years back that government will need 5 times more tax officers to take care of the notices that they will be able to generate because of the automation on the government side. And the industry is facing the burden of it today. So I always used to say government is much more advanced in terms of the technology usage compared to the industry. And that is still true even today. So the industry investment in terms of automation and technology has to go up. And the third point, which I say, is that people are talking about creating a firewall or creating a kind of a repository of the data in which they can respond to the government quickly. And one of the senior most partner of a big four firm had one day told me kind of informally on a chat that Neeraj, if you respond within 24 hours to a government request for a data with data, they will not pursue that information or a kind of a notice further. But if you delay in providing the data, then you will have more challenges. So today, the industry's requirement is very clearly how fast we can provide the data, how quickly we can respond into that. And now automation is not the word, we are talking more about hyper automation into the entire flow. So it is not kind of integrating only from your SAP systems to our ASP tools. It is kind of integrating multiple sources of data or taking all that information into a tech stack data warehouse and then building the repositories on top of it or building the intelligence on top of it. That is a kind of a major change we are seeing. And last but not the least, the biggest change is going to come up from the government side. Again, it is that they have kind of proceeded in kind of appointing more IRPs. So NIC is the only one IRP today, the invoice uh, for the invoice registrations, and more IRPs are going to come into play. And that will transform that people from 5 crore to 50 crore turnover also will be required to do a invoicing. That is what I assume. Maybe 2 years, 3 years down the line, every B2C transaction also may go through a invoicing process or a recording onto it. And like if you take countries like KSA and others have already gone with a B2C registration. So these are the type of changes which are going to be transformational. Government will have too much amount of data with them, and with the intelligence that they are building on their side, they will be able to ascertain the industry's performance in a very different level, and industry has to prepare for it. And if you ask me very frankly, very honestly, that preparedness or that mindset change is not happening. And maybe 2 years of COVID has again delayed that mindset change to an extent. So I feel that that transformation will happen. It is going to be important that they get the right approach. With the minimum amount of changes, they are able to achieve the requirement results. So that is important. So that are the high level kind of changes which I am feeling that will come soon into our journey into the tax technology. Over to you, Prashant.
No, I think very well put. And why I'm slightly laughing is hearing all of that from Neeraj. Imagine this 5 years back, somebody talking about notices being coming out from VAT and all of it. Things have really gone far. Yeah,
Yeah.
but that's very rightly put, Neeraj, by you. And especially, I was just thinking, we see it on ground, being an indirect tax person myself, how we struggle at times with clients on preparing annual returns, how much of our teams have to work on reconciliations. Now, given the data that the government already has, the amount of notices they have, and we have sat together on GSTN table, Neeraj, you and I, and we have talked to GSTN on what can happen in coming times. So seeing the other side of it, which is that the notices are there, that's the reality. You see 3B versus GSTR1, you see 3B versus GSTR2A, and you see, we hear from our team members that we are getting exhausted with the number of notices we end up handling for our companies. So those are things that are really at times difficult to handle, and thinking out of the box is very important. And that's where I think it is important to also understand from a company standpoint or a taxpayer standpoint, what is it that they believe they are facing as challenges on ground, what they believe their tax teams are facing as challenges on ground, and how do they say things improving, and what are the asks that they may have from a technology standpoint. Those would be important, and what are the areas that they are now focusing considering the returns are filing. So over to you, Shrey, if you can help us understand, given you and your tax team there, what are the type of things where you see struggle in, and what are the things that you are looking at or evaluating as a company that would require some kind of a technology intervention to help improve your team's efficiency and probably help better in terms of managing the tax function?
Yeah, so I think in terms of the areas where my team is spending most of the time, as both Neeraj and you rightly pointed out, one has been all these reconciliations. Filing GSTR 3B and 1 is one part of the game, but then going to the annual return and then sort of reconciling it is totally a different ball game. The amount of time it takes, and the other problem is, the GSTR 2A, for instance, is not static. It keeps on changing. So while you're preparing your annual returns, every suppose 2 weeks or 1 month down the line, you again download the data, it's a different number altogether. So it keeps on changing, right? And now we have the government also bringing out new changes. I believe GST is one law where the amount of circulars and notifications that have come out bringing out the changes is, I think, surpassing any other regulation that has been brought out by the government so far. So that is one. So I think what we as a company are focusing on in terms of reducing the time and sort of automating how we can, automate the entire reconciliation process. And even before going to the reconciliation process, I think preparing the purchase registers. Most of the ERPs that many of the organizations, include ours, are using do not give the exact set of data that you require to sort of do that reconciliation. So one, we are looking at all these optical reader concepts, bots, etc., that we can bring into picture and sort of read the documents and prepare that PR for us, and then automate the reconciliation process. So I think that is one area. The other area is, I think, the number of notices. Now, our company is one where we have more than 30 registrations, right? Span over multiple states and entities. Now, the amount of notices that we are dealing with on a daily basis is phenomenal, to be honest. And number two, there's I think in all service tax or VAT or even in GST, obviously the concept of extended period of limitation. Now, all these notices do help us in future, or will help us in future when there's a litigation to say that we have already intimated, to take that ground of limitation. So keeping a track of all these notices is definitely a problem that we are looking at, and we are also looking to sort of build something around it so that me or someone in my team or the management can at a one point of time know what all notices from which jurisdictions have come in and what all we have been our positions in replying to those notices. So these are I would say the two major areas that we are definitely spending a lot of time on.
Thanks, Shay. Thanks. And then the point that you made around, the 30 registrations and the amount of notices that you end up getting, especially on the other side, it has all been automated in terms of notices. Earlier, the tax authorities, the people used to at least look at the data to send you the notice before that. Now it's all been generated courtesy the technology. So I guess that work of tax officer has also reduced. So the follow-ups from the tax office has also been more aggressive on. So we may thank GSTN for one thing, but the amount of effort now we have to put in on all the notices is something
Correct.
that a slight curse has to go to GSTN, that how they have used technology to enable the tax office has definitely increased our effort as tax function. At the same time, I think what is very important point that you made is the repository piece. The 30 registrations and the notices, how are we creating a repository of it is very, very important. And we see that as an ask coming up from a lot of companies, because most companies today have these 20 registration or 30 registration. To have a control over it, as tax said, the need for repository or a solution around it is a very, very important need that one should really be aware of. So that's a very good point that you made, Shrey. Anup, what has been your experience? How you have seen things change at your end, and what do you see your tax team struggling with, and how do you see things changing, and what are you evaluating from a technology standpoint?
Yeah, definitely adding on to Shrey, because Shrey has already added his points, and we also have the similar problems. And beautifully quoted by Neeraj and Siddharth earlier, like businesses has to catch up with government now. So on technology, so that also is a beautiful language, we can say. Earlier we never thought of these kind of points. But yeah, use of bot, again I can say we are using it for many cases, especially for airline and hotel credit. We did that and we were successful from the day GST started. So we did take all the credits because of use of bot. So this is a big change which we have implemented. And another important point on after e-invoicing, people were thinking like we will get all our GSTR one sorted. But again, with this so much of exceptions and system restrictions, I don't see that also is like so positively. So government has to see how we can make it more automated, and we also have to work towards it along with government. Otherwise, yeah, there is no end to it. End of the day, for companies like us, we have to do lot of compliances, and it's not like we were hiding anything before GST also. So for bigger companies only, the number of compliances have increased, and the smaller companies, definitely still there is a limit of 50 crore, and they are going away with that. But again, just one more point I want to add, not from my industry, but what Neeraj has quoted, 5 crore to 50 crore. So definitely government has to come up with some solid infrastructure plan and how they can benefit the small businesses. Otherwise, why the small businesses will go and automate their business, their accounting system, or they will not have so much of knowledge about how to use a system or computer. Maybe something on a mobile they can come up with. So government has to work on that infrastructure and to get all the supply chain into like GST ambit in the technology front. Right now, like only 50 crore and above means we are just limiting the number of SSEs. Yeah.
That's a
Prashant, if
very
I may just
important
make a
point.
comment here.
Yeah, please go ahead.
Yeah. So what is coming out from this discussion so far, and that has been our experience otherwise also, is that most companies are still overwhelmed with the routine compliances, and therefore bulk of the time is still being spent on automating the routine stuff. So despite the fact that we are fifth year, this is the fifth year into GST. So one would really hope that all this ends soon and companies are able to focus more on other value-adding areas, you leveraging on this automation that would have happened. So, for example, analytics is one area clearly that comes to mind. Second is working with other territories, let's say other countries like Saudi, Middle East, or whatever, to leverage on the experience that the tax teams would have gained in India to see how you can, help your colleagues there or your teams there to roll out e-invoicing or other, other automations around taxation. So one would really hope that we reach that stage, sometime soon, because it's already been 5 years now.
No, agree, Siddharth, and your thoughts align with what Neeraj was just saying a while back as well. And as you said in your opening remarks, that business is still catching up with the government, how things can happen. And that's where the struggle lies, with the enormity of the data and the point that you made on data cleansing, and which Shrey also said that, how the data is coming out of the first source, which is your ERP, makes a lot of difference. So I guess in our experience, unfortunately, the companies are still struggling with the first piece of it itself, how they can, have the data in the right shape so that the necessary reconciliation can happen. And the point that we are linked to our eco chain, which means our vendors, not only our data is important now, how our vendors are putting up the data becomes extremely critical in terms of undertaking reconciliation. So we all need to perhaps hope as well as work towards, along with our companies, in ensuring that this first level is crossed as early as possible. Otherwise, this catch up will continue because the government is moving on. I mean, the amount of automation they are doing at their end, both in terms of analytics as well as in assisting taxpayers, surely means that they have a lot of work already done at their end. So this catch up, if it has to end, probably the industry has to have more mindset towards both enabling technology and work towards catching it up with necessary tools at their end. So I'll just move on to Purnada. I mean, and you are unique here, Purnada, because you are the CIO, as I said. So what do you think as CIO you want your tax team to come up with? You generally, as Shrey said, we are looking at bots, OCR as technology. Uh, Anup made his point. He said, on repository. So when, because this is an amalgamation between tax and IT as a function, if I look at the ground level. So what is your general take on what you would ask or suggest the tax teams to do while they are evaluating what sort of technology to be used and how they can engage people like you in those discussions?
Yeah, I think I'm really the odd man out here, all our tax professionals and experts. I'm really not the right person to comment on the subject matter. But anyway, from a technology piece, few things came in my mind, and especially I think Mr. Neeraj, which he mentioned during his speech regarding the big data analytics or analytics as such. So this system is actually generating lot of data, and data means it will generate insights. I was just thinking in future government will collect this data and tell the income tax authorities that this organization is liable to pay this much of income tax because he is generating so much of sales. Then he will tell the MCA or Ministry of Corporate Affairs that this company should declare this as a revenue because this is his sales. Then they can tell the SEBI authorities that this is the company's this thing, and this should be the company's some blah blah blah, some data points. I think that is where the things are going. Like somebody was saying, and I think you are also mentioning, and I think Neeraj was also saying that government is running ahead of the organizations in terms of automation. And in this is what is going to happen. So one data set will provide multiple insights to multiple other departments, and this way the transparency and the integration will happen. This is the one part of the story. The second part of the story, as I believe, is, see, always we need to look at the 50s or the 40s where when the automation actually started in the industry. Industry, we call it 2.0 or whatever in our technology parlance. Now, if you look at those automation days, I mean, people were actually losing jobs in United States or Germany or other industrially developed countries. So I think here, what is one side, there is a risk and there is an opportunity. The risk is many indirect tax professionals may lose their jobs. Why? Because all the reconciliations, filings, your returns, and in fact, returns can also become automatic. In fact, you are talking about lot of tax professionals are required to handle those cases. This can be also done by robots. I can just think about endless stories. I mean, this can happen continuously. One side, the risk is people might lose job who are indirect tax professionals. I'm sorry to say, I mean, it may not be the PwC guys, but the other guys in the industries. On the other hand, the opportunity is lot of reconciliations and manual activities will go off, and hence I think the time taken today to file a tax return or to do lot of activities in terms of understanding what is to be submitted, and this I think uh, I mean really very complicated, so many forms and so many unnecessary things, and all this paperworks will simply go off. things will become more transparent, and system or technology platforms will do all the activities. Today, when you log an order, see, it is called Amazon or an Uber experience. When you book a taxi, do you need to call the taxi driver or the Uber call center or somebody else in the ecosystem that where is the taxi, when it is going to come, when it is going to reach? Nothing. It's just a simple experience. Same thing, I believe these platforms are going to change the way we today work. So I think this is what is very, very interesting to come and see how things get to us more transparency and more automation. And or maybe we can put it like this, instead of saying people losing jobs as a risk of indirect tax professionals, their roles may change. They also may become, knowledge workers, or I will say insightful, data workers or something like that. They might become data analysts instead of tax workers. So maybe chartered accountants will start becoming data analysts. I think we can look at those role transformations as the platform matures. I think that is what I see future is looking like. Thank you.
No, excellent points made, Parnala, especially, when I was scared, when is my job going, that's going to be a tough one. And thank God you course corrected on that one. But what I see, I mean, on a very serious note, I think that's a very, very important point you make, that how we used to work vis-a-vis how we work today and perhaps in future is going to change dramatically. And hence the need for upskilling yourself or evolving yourself to meet current requirement as well as be in line with what the future requirement could be is something that is clearly visible. And we see as indirect tax professionals in our organization itself, there's a lot of stress on how our colleagues and our teams work, and those things have changed from what we used to do in past. So the point on upskill is very, very critical there. The other important point which you made is how the government is going to use this data across the forums and not just in indirect tax per se is also critical. And the same is happening. We see that today an investigation which happens in indirect tax moves on to direct tax or corporate tax or vice versa. So it's only a matter of time. And in our knowledge, at least from whatever discussions we have had, there's a lot of data exchange that is being created between the two nodal bodies, CBIC and the CBDT and customs for that matter. So therefore, it becomes very, very clear that the government is moving to the direction which you quoted, Panada, and therefore the need for industry also to move to a similar requirement, how they create their exchange internally between teams of tax and ensure that there is seamless cooperation there. That becomes important.
Yeah,
I
if you
think
just allow me 1 more minute,
yeah,
I'll just
please go.
talk about something else. Look at the way the social identity platform is getting changed. Initially we had Aadhaar, then we have the passport separately, then we have the bank account separately, then we have, PAN card separately, then we have, the voter ID card separately. Look at the way government is changing the social identity. Every platform is getting integrated one by one, including your mobile number. So you have to now link Aadhaar with everything else. So whatever you have. So that is one level of unification. Second level of unification will be in the revenue part for the government, which is the taxes and other things. You rightly mentioned customs and maybe many other regulatory authorities. All the platforms will get synergized, and then government will be able to understand or estimate or do. Okay, look at from the macroeconomy point of view. Government can do much better planning and budgeting if all these platforms get synchronized. I think these are the opportunities. I think looking at data and data insight is a enormous area. Like it's like a ocean, and as you go inside, I mean, endless way you can expose and extrapolate the data for many insights. So I think it is, I think, looking very interesting, the times coming up. And as you rightly pointed out, except maybe the PwC guys or the people like Signet or other people will have to definitely change their profiles to suit the actual requirement of the business. Thank you.
Thanks, Vandana. So, I think just I would want to take your point of view on that in terms of integration of platforms. What we are seeing in the market as well, how corporate tax vis-a-vis indirect tax is being worked out. Anything specific that you have seen in the market, and anything that you would want to share as an experience, with the participants here around the corporate tax merger with the indirect tax. Siddharth, would you want to put some thoughts on that in terms of reconciliation or otherwise?
Yeah, so see, this is a very natural reconciliation, that will happen eventually, where you will have different data sets being shared with different tax authorities, and one would expect that they have to be in sync, right? Now, there can be different ways to achieve this. One is the government itself coming up with some sort of common format to say that you just provide us data in this format, and we'll assess the same information from different perspectives, from different lens, right? Direct tax, indirect tax, and so on and so forth. The other is putting the onus on the industry to say that you have to run these reconciliations, which becomes a very cumbersome exercise for the industry to do. As we know today, also in a lot of audit notices, there are states which are asking for these kind of reconciliations. You have to reconcile the GST data with the income tax returns, and and so on and so forth, which a lot of companies kind of struggle to kind of reconcile because it is something they've not been doing.
Yeah.
It doesn't come naturally to anybody. So therefore, simplifying some of these templates or taking the raw data and the government then running this, this kind of reconciliation at their end would probably ease the pain for the industry.
No, so if
So,
Prashant, if I can add to
yeah,
this, I think in terms of your question, I think the data exchange is the reality now, and there's a lot of things that are happening. We, as an industry or as a company, we have also received few notices, or our vendors have received few notices wherein we deducted withholding taxes because they were an offshore vendor providing services, but obviously that vendor was not registered under GST in India. So they have received notices whether you have paid GST. On a forward mechanism, or we have paid under reverse charge mechanism. Similarly, we have cases wherein customs data, for example, there's this annual information report basis that while our income tax assessments are going on, there was certain equipment which went out. They asked, how have you reported this in your return? Where's the equipment export showing or appearing in your books of accounts? So I think they are moving quite fast on that, and definitely, I think government is very, very clear, and as we keep on saying, data is the new oil. They're definitely working quite a lot in terms of the analytics place, and we all the industries therefore need to focus quite a lot in terms of integrating and ensuring that their data is common or equivalent in all sites.
no, that's very helpful, Shay. And to just take it forward, Shay, so what would you see as an ask from a government, knowing that the government is moving in the direction that we know of, taking almost all kind of data and exchanging it across different forums or bodies per se across the taxes. So what is it that you would really want the government to facilitate on, or some points around that, if you can provide as an industry?
So I think there are quite a few, I would say not really related to the tech part of it, but I can still sort of raise it here and then maybe come to the tech part of it as well. So one is, I think there's a common problem everywhere in terms of your suppliers not uploading their data online and then you are being chased for that. So I think they need to be very clear in terms of they cannot have their hand chase both the supplier as well as the recipient for that matter. Two, I think in terms of the jurisdiction, I think as a company we receive notices from central as well as state jurisdictions as well, so that needs to stop because we have been replying same issue to different departments of the state, so that becomes really painful. From a tech part, I think when the e-invoicing came in, I think one of the feature was that you can only rectify it within 24 hours, which I believe is a very short period of time. Similarly, for a company like us, where we are raising more than 1,000 invoices every month, so left with no time, and the errors do want, tend to make errors, and therefore they need to bring out some mechanism on that front. Apart from that, I think there's certain other small points like the server is not working while you're logging, and then multiple logins for 30 restrictions, etc., etc. Some small problems that they are there. I think where they need to sort of improve their GSTN system. So these are, I think, few of the others that I would say that the industry would have from the government.
Sure, thanks, Shay, for that. Anup, over to you. What could be your ask from the government?
I have a little long list, but I will try to keep it short. So while the government is ahead, I can say still they have to stabilize the system. There are too many changes. They are coming up with so many changes. They have to give time to settle. We have to evolve. There's a big change. So if you see so many notices, like Shrey said, we are getting so many notices just because they are not using that data properly. So maybe 3B differences, reconciliations, many data are available in GSTR portal, but what they are doing, they are not interpreting it properly, or they're not having the data itself. Sometimes they say, okay, what you have uploaded, you give us the data. So they have to first stabilize. Definitely, they have to train their people. Then there is a gap. There is a gap between the law and how the GST portal works. So there are many examples, so I don't want to quote them. So then there is a cancellation of invoice. So this is a major challenge for the industry. So as such, there right now we have a only 24-hour window. But there are a lot of practical challenges which industries are facing to cancel it within 24 hours. So this time has to be changed, at least like 48 to 72 hours, which should be at least practical enough and for both businesses and as well as for the government. And then again, too much of changes is having so much of complexities with the business. Now earlier business used to focus on business. Now I can say business is also focusing on tax. So they're busy with so many tax changes. So we have to we can't just do these changes by the tax team. We need to involve business, and day in and day out, they have to work with us for these changes. So that's why we can see so many business people in this call. So, and also if you see one more change is the assessment, how the assessment is happening right now. I already talked about technology. There is a lot of use of technology, but again, government is lacking in interpreting those data. And due to that, we are like being lead to a lot of non-compliance notices end of the day. And we have to go and again litigate these with the tax authority. So these are the few changes, or I can say, which we have asks from the government. I can see this much as of now. And yeah.
So thanks, Anup. Very critical point. I think the point that you made around the notices and the data being available on the GST portal itself
Right.
is something that we hear a lot from a lot of companies, especially where there is a 3B versus GSTR1 reconciliation notice which comes up, or 2A versus GSTR 3B. It is for a defined period. And if you expand that period, the answer comes out automatically in that case in terms of reconciliations. So those are
And
things
basically,
where yeah, go ahead.
just to add one more point is, there is no opportunity to revise the return.
Sure.
So
No, I think that is
yeah.
something which, as tax professionals, we are so used to revising our returns
Yes.
that the opportunity to not revise the return has not come out, and we have not been able to digest that. So we see
Correct.
that as being heard to GSTN every now and then, because they do have sessions where they ask for industry feedback. So revising of GSTR 3B is, I think, a perennial request which has been there since inception, and we hope someday it does become a reality. But I think the point that you made on notices and how the data is being analyzed at the government level, if that
Correct.
can improvise, perhaps a lot of not required notices can be done away with. And the other point that you made in terms of training of their staff and
Right.
some of the aspects of how they need to handle the system is also very important, because we have seen cases of refunds, of notices, where the tax officers by themselves are not very aware of how to use technology. So as much as industry needs to catch up on the technology front, I think there is a need for the government officials, especially at the ground level, also to be trained better to ensure that they are also aware of how to enable themselves using the technology piece, because the technology is there, but it is as much an enablement as much you can use it. Otherwise, it can be a big hindrance as well if you can't really use the technology the way it used to be. So that's again a very important point of how you train your people. I think the other point that I see is the rigidness. At times we see that GSTN, as you said, there is law and there is GSTN. And because certain aspects can be handled at GSTN in a certain manner, even if it is not specifically prescribed in the law, then you have to still follow it. And therefore, the rigidness in the system, although they have reduced it a lot over a period of time, is something that can be looked at, because errors will happen. You can't avoid errors in any compliance, but that does not and should not be held entirely against a taxpayer. There should be an opportunity how you can correct it. In IT front, they say there are corner cases which are at times not taken care of correctly by technology. So those corner cases should not be handled only via unhappy path, but there should be a path to really take care of them. So Neeraj, over to you. What do you see as be probable ask from, let's say, the government, or for us, as we say, from GSTN or NIC, who are there as a pseudo or a front end for the government for us as technology players. So what would be your ask from there? Sorry, you're on mute. You're on mute.
One particular point I would say my ask from government is maybe expand the amount of APIs that are available in terms of the involvement that we can do. So there are certain areas like creating the challans and other things. Those APIs are not available to us. If they can provide that, we can provide even much more a seamless kind of thing. Second thing is the true sense of invoices available in a digital format to the other parties or maybe to our customers is still not complete, because the way the information is being taken is not an absolute true representation of the invoice that we have. So somehow if we can avoid that particular part and the invoice actually becomes a true representation wherein you can consume that invoice digitally and you do not have to do a data entry or a OCR of it, then that could be a very interesting thing. Third thing is the talking between the multiple government departments. If it can be kind of made faster and it can be made better, that will be kind of something very important. Maybe ICE Gate to GSTN, which is now already in place partially, but it can be enhanced. 26AS to the GSTN data, that is also becoming a very major problem for the industry. So that is something. These are the, I would say, three asks from the government. I have few asks from the industry itself. And the first ask is please dump Excel, because if whatever is there in Excel is neither in your ERP, nor it is into the government portal, nor it is in our ASP portal, and you will never be able to respond to any notices from the Excel. So please dump the Excel data or the Excel preparation that is happening. Second point to the industry is have a single source of truth. Do not have multiple different systems and multiple things. Third thing is don't go into too much amount of jargons of what you need to do on the OCR or what connector you will use or what type of a data integration is done. Keep your ask simple. Your ERP to the government, it has to be a seamless experience. Government back to your ERP has to be a seamless experience. And the data portability has to be on the both ways. And you should be able to access your data to respond to the notices or to respond to anything that you need to do. So if you keep your things and ask simple, then the service providers like PwC, like Signet would be able to respond or support in a much, much better way. So these are my three asks from the government and three asks from the industry.
Thanks, Neeraj, and really very well put. I think you've in a way eaten our words in that way and helped us also put across what we would request companies as well from our side. I think a couple of points which you made, especially on the invoice front, and I think Siddharth and I have been discussing that among ourselves, which is how can we automate, especially the AP process, wherein the data entry happens for the vendor invoices. A lot of companies still do it manually. And we were hoping, and this was discussed, Neeraj, you have been part of those discussions with GSTN and NIC, where we hope and we still hope that there would be sort of an exchange or sort of those invoices which are created on on NIC. If those can be digitally shared with the buyer, then in a way, to that extent at least, buyers would be capable to fetch the data like we fetch it for the e-way bill in a similar manner, and perhaps be in a position to automate the data entry as well with minimal challenges. And what that will ensure is the challenge on the reconciliation front would also be to a lot of extent be taken care of. So it is very, very critical. It saves time, it brings in efficiency from a process standpoint at business level, it brings more clarity, lack of reconciliation requirements. So it's a win-win proposition to that extent. It also reduces work for tax officer, because if there are no reconciliation issue, then obviously less of challenge for the tax officer as well to that extent. So that's very important. And the other point on APIs, I mean, to give you an example, notices. Now, in today's time, and we see a lot of companies getting notices on the portal, and the tax teams are not aware that those notices are already there. Imagine if those APIs are available and we are able to basically pull those notices and put it in the solution and give the alerts through monitoring system to tax heads and everyone, then a lot of control can be built in and ensure that there is no slippage in terms of replying or reverting on those notices to the tax office as well. So that's again a very, very critical piece, that if more and more information can be made available. And we have seen challenges from government standpoint. We have seen that there have been issues with GSTN faced on scraping of their websites. Why would that be required if there is APIs available to do it? And of course, scraping the website is unethical, perhaps not required, should not be done. To avoid all of this, it is better to see where all GSTN and other government portals can help us getting those information through the right manner. So that is again a very important point. The ask to the companies that you made, especially reduce the amount of jargons that you require and simplify what you want, is very, very critical. I think that's very well put in.
Prashant, talking about APIs, sorry, just one point I want to make. Yeah. So I believe GST and NIC have still done a great job in terms of making available so many APIs to the taxpayers. One would expect now customs and direct tax also to do the same, because that is one area clearly where all these APIs are missing, including MCA. There's a lot of room for automation there as well. And in fact, one can, if you have these APIs, one can come up with some sort of integrated platform, where you can seamlessly reconcile information, fetch data from different portals, reconcile it, and there's a lot of value that one can add to the business if you have these APIs.
Without doubt. I mean, I think that's a very, very critical point that you make, Siddharth, an interesting one. As we see, government is moving fast, but I think there is a catch-up required on one part of the department within the government as well, which is on IceGate as well as on the direct tax side. Hopefully, and we do hear that a lot, that there is this, IceGate 2.0, which is coming up, and there are a lot of developments that are being made. Firstly, to provide IceGate APIs to probably other government departments, and of course to even taxpayers. So we hope that happens soon, and there are a lot better integrations possible, because bill of entry is one document, and we ask companies, how do you get your bill of entry data? Most of them keep on answering that we get it via CHA. I mean, who has no locus standi between government or the taxpayer? The data actually comes from the CHA most of the time, and they rely on that. And there are discrepancies between what you get from CHA vis-a-vis what you get from the GSTN portal now. So, I mean, that's a very critical aspect. How you can automate customs would also make a difference to how we run our tax function at large. Purnada, over to you. One of the last. Oh, Neeraj, you were raising your hand. Please go ahead.
One point. So one particular point that the industry also should know, and the GST data has one very positive aspect also. Today, for most of the new banking decisions in terms of credit that they will give to the industry is also going to be dependent on the GST data. And this has become a very interesting point for the financial institutions to consider. So that a kind of a new ecosystem is being created for that. And that is going to be highly beneficial to the industry. So there is also a positive aspect in terms of what or how this data is benefiting the industry in terms of credit decisions. So that was just one additional point.
No, absolutely, absolutely. And we see a lot of these use cases, as Purnada was saying some time back, in terms of analytics, how to use the data going forward. We'll see a lot of use cases beyond financial institution also coming up. And you made points on analytics of pharma and otherwise. So we see a lot of scope there as well, as industry understands this data better, or the functions understand this data better. The other day, there was a company who was asking how we can build our logistics, knowing that you have e-way bill, knowing you have e-invoicing, what else we can do using the same data as well. So that definitely would be an area to look forward to. I think given the time remaining, I would move towards the closing remarks, and I'll give first to Shrey. I mean, Shrey, if you would want to just put some closing remarks, what could be your ask, and what are the 2-3 big things that you're seeing upcoming in future from a tax function using technology? Over to you, Shrey.
I think so. Thanks, Prashant, for that. So I think one thing in terms of the ask would be, and I think we have been discussing is, I think it has to be an e-invoicing for all. Now, currently, obviously, there's a turnover limit, but as an industry who is operating in remote areas of the country and where we are dealing with a lot of small vendors as well, I think once the e-invoicing is in place, it will definitely solve a lot of problems that we are currently looking at. And that is one. Two, I think the proper seamless integration of different departments of the government or different regulators of the government would definitely help in sort of having all the data at one place, and obviously reduce the compliance as well as the overall notices that we receive from different parts, right? So I think these are the two primary asks that I would have. And I think overall, from a technology perspective, definitely, I think the industry needs to invest more in the technology and needs to understand the importance of technology, because it will definitely bring more efficiency, reduce the overall cost, reduce the interest cost, etc., bring more efficiency, develop the ability to sort of revert to the new changes, and obviously help in risk management as well. So that's all from my side, Prashant.
Okay, thanks, Shrey, and I'll request Anup if he can provide his point of view around these aspects.
Yep. So not much. Again, same what Shrey said, and just to add what Neeraj said, that do away with Excel. We have to use technology, and again we have used bot, as I said, for hotel credit and airlines credit. So try to go into technology rather than using any Excel or any kind of I can say manual tools. So that is the way forward, and implement not only for GST, for all other taxes, implement within your ERP. You can do the changes. There are a lot of changes available, and it can be done. Customization can be done at whatever level we can think of. Only thing, we have to put in a lot of efforts, time, and but it will save a lot for future. And also we can give the ready-made data to the tax during the time of tax assessments. Basically, we struggle during the time of tax assessment, and we need more and more time from tax authorities to submit the data. So why not, we should be future ready. So that is the thought from my side. Yeah.
Sure. Thanks, Arup, for this. Pranada, over to you. How you see, what would you want Minda Group to do from a technology standpoint as tax function? How they should use you better, and what could be your, crystal ball gazing on future?
See, I think most of the speakers have already covered everything. I'll just bucket my discussion into three pieces, or three buckets rather. One is the people part, one is the process part, and then is the technology part. So in the people part, I think Neeraj ji very rightly pointed out the training to government officials and also the training to the indirect tax officials who are working in the organizations has to really increase. And not only training, awareness of the system, and how to use the system, what are the tools already available there, how to do reconciliation, all this part is very, very important. So I think this is from the people side, people enablement point of view. Then process point of view, as many speakers have already pointed out, like seamless integration with the your indirect tax, with your the other processes in the organization. It can be your complete procure to pay process. It can be your complete reconciliation process with the suppliers or your customers. I think these processes should be completely integrated, and you should have an integrated view when you look at the process from a process point of view. Last but not the least is the technology piece. So technology, I have few things. One is, strengthen the platform. So many times, the platform misbehaves. We have multiple times talking in the late night or in the I think in the early mornings or something like that. The platform does not respond well or something like that. So this has to be really fixed. I mean, this cannot go like this, because it's either lost to the organization or lost to the the country or the nation. So I think this has to be really fixed very, very clearly. Second is APIs. Many people have told APIs have to be really strong enough, and it should really work very, very well. I think this is very, very important part. Cyber risk management is very, very important. Why? Because we had multiple occasions where Aadhaar was compromised, or many other compromise happened in the government sides. Defense got compromised, defense sites. I think this is extremely important from cyber risk management. The sites have to be really protected very well. And one more thing is, seamless connectivity between multiple systems, where Onuminda team has to do their job, PwC team has to do their job, and also like the platforms are integrated with each other. EUA bill platform, IRN platform, or your GSTN platform, all should be synchronized. Many times, many confusion also happens. Why so many platforms are required? Why can't we do everything in single platform? And all these things are coming up. So I think these things are also extremely important. So this synchronization, seamlessness has to happen very, very clearly. And one more thing I understand is, as technology will go deep, the horizontal processes will be covered more. I think this is one very important. Many people talked about artificial intelligence or bots or many other technologies, or maybe tomorrow blockchain will be there. Obviously blockchain will come, big data analytics. I think these technologies will go deep, and obviously the spread and the access will go horizontally more. Last but not the least, we use, in our businesses, like one example is AutoDX. AutoDX is basically B2B exchange, data exchange platform made by IBM for auto industry. Then we also use the supplier portals or customer portals. My look at it is, once this GSTN portal becomes really very, very good, they should replace all these other portals and make this as the only data exchange portals. Look at US market, look at many Southeast Asian market, European market. They have only government portal for data exchange. They do not have any other extranet or any other, intranet or any other kind of networks or platforms. So this is what I think, government should look at, how to replace the other portals and make this as the only data exchange portal between all the, the collaborators. It can be suppliers, customers, or tier 1, 2, 3, 4, I mean, whatever. I think this is what I think looks like in future is going to happen, and things are going into that direction. And in fact, we have discussed in our SIAM and ACMA meetings that this AutoDX and our internal portals will go away tomorrow if this platform really works very well, because we need to do much more. We are currently sharing drawings, designs, many other things, not only the compliance data or the tax data. So if this can be done, I think then the leverage of using technology and we call it economies of scale will definitely happen and come up. Thank you.
So really insightful, Pranala. Thanks for all your inputs on that. Neeraj, over to you. Last few comments that you may have on this.
I think heard everybody, and what we talk internally in Signet and what I talk externally to all our clients and partners and other things. Please remove all standalone functions. Start becoming connected and smart. That is the only way to grow. And more you look at any kind of function, either in terms of text technology or any other area, if you start becoming connected and smart, automatically all the benefits of the technology will come to you. And second point is training is extremely important. So training of text tech means training of indirect tax professionals, and training of the industry in terms of tax technology is extremely important, because in India it has just exploded and evolved in last 5 years, but globally also the way it's moving, training in terms of tax technology is extremely critical. So focus on to that part and kind of trust the technology, use the technology, do not go into much of the jargon, make it simple, but stay connected and smart. That's the ending comments I'd like to make.
No, I think very rightly put in, to stay connected is how it should be. And I think the word I would always take from you is the trust the technology. I mean, they will definitely have teething issues, but one has to just live through it, because any new change does take time to both adopt, and that's where your upskilling comes into picture. And trust has only helped us, if we didn't trust the GSTN to be able to run the way it has now. It has taken its time. It has definitely gone on to our patience, and we have lived through those times. And today we see how well oiled the GSTN machinery generally works for all of us. And probably this can be taken up, and I'm sure it is being taken up across the globe in terms of how we as India have leapfrogged on tax technology. And the point that Siddharth made, that we can perhaps enable other territories from our experience, is something to really look forward to. Siddharth, over to you. I mean, you started it off, and would love to see
So a
and
lot
hear
has
from
already
you in
been
terms of
said, so I won't take much time, Prashant. But despite all the challenges that we are all aware of and that we spoke about, I think we should all take pride in what we have achieved, both as corporates as well as a nation, given that we started only 5 years back. And if you look at, where we are today, including, a successful rollout of e-invoicing, a lot of developed countries we know have not been able to achieve this, last 20 years. So of course, it's been a roller coaster ride, but it was bound to be this way because we were trying to do so many things in such a short time frame. I think it's just a matter of time, maybe another year or so, things will stabilize more, and then we'll start getting the real benefits of this automation, both for the government as well as for the industry. So that's all.
Thanks, Siddharth, for that. I think I still remember on 30th of September 20, I and Prateek were sitting in RS room, and we were trying to plead just, and when we were entering, Mr. Mehta, Siddharth Mehta was trying to call us and say, take some time, just take some time, because we may not be all that ready. But here we stand and say, oh, after 1.5 years, the government has gone ahead with 50 crores, and we see how European market and other markets are still catching it up, and it's very difficult for them to digest that today we generate what enormity of data. and the amount of e-invoicing we do. And that requires vision and a lot of strength, and we should give credit to government for that, to have that strength to move forward in that manner, and to the industry to take that as challenge and really come up to it. So I think that's how we all have done it, and congratulations to all of us to the way we have really adopted technology in our tax function. I think we have come to the end of the session. Thank you so much to all of you. It's been really a pleasure, as always, talking to all of you. Thanks for all your time and insightful points. Over to you, Avinash, to take it to close it. Thanks. Thanks once again.
Thank you very much, sir. Do you have some 5-minute time for the Q&A? That's in the chat box.
I think we have covered all those points. I had a look at it, Avinash, so we have covered them as part of our discussions. So, there may not be a need specifically to really take them up.
Not an issue. Okay, sir. Okay, sir. So, sir, on behalf of ASSOCHAM, I would like to convey my sincere thanks to our session moderator, Mr. Prashant Agrawal, and all eminent panelists for sparing their time with us. And I would also like to thank all the participants for sparing their time and attending this very informative session. So we look forward to have you with us in our next program. Thanks a lot. Thank you.
Thank you. Take care.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks. Bye.